two courts to historic cases involving former President Donald Trump. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in his claim that the presidents have total immunity. His lawyers arguing he shouldn't face prosecution for anything he did while in office. We'll review what the justices may decide to do now, but as one of them said today, quote, "We're writing a rule for the ages." At the exact same time in New York City, Trump spent another day in a courtroom as a longtime friend continued to testify against him in his criminal hush-money trial.
We're writing a rule for the ages.
We have a big case today. This judge isn't allowing me to go. We have a big case today in the Supreme Court on presidential immunity. A president has to have immunity. If you don't have immunity, you just have a ceremonial president.
CBS News national correspondent Errol Barnett is in Lower Manhattan tonight covering Trump's criminal case. But we begin with CBS News legal correspondent Jan Crawford, who's outside the Supreme Court. Jan, good evening to you. The former president is claiming he has absolute immunity. Walk us through what you heard from Trump's defense team about how they support that claim.
Well, I mean, that is a sweeping argument, right? It is what it says, absolute immunity. That means that he cannot be prosecuted for any of his official acts while he was president. And obviously, because that is a sweeping argument, the justices really kind of drilled down on who and what that would mean for future presidents. You quoted and played that clip from Justice Gorsuch, but that was a real focus of the justices today. Nearly 3 hours of arguments. It was history. This case, their decision will go well beyond Donald J. Trump and will apply to all future presidents. So the idea that a president could be absolutely immune from anything while in office was very troubling to many of the justices who emphasized that the president is not above the law. The framers did not include immunity in the Constitution because obviously, as Justice Kagan said, they were worried about a monarch and thinking about that system. That's not the system we have here. So you saw a lot of kind of pushback on what that would mean if a president could go into the Oval Office and know they could do anything. As Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson said, it would kind of turn the Oval Office potentially into a seat of criminal activity. But Ed, on the flip side, and why, again, the justices are looking at this case well beyond Trump, they're also concerned about the law being weaponized against presidents, that presidents could be prosecuted for almost anything once they leave office that could affect how they govern. And so I think what they're working for here is some kind of middle ground where there may be some immunity for some official acts, and that's what they've got to decide.
Right, because what's the definition of that and what's the scope of it? I want to play again to reinforce this belief that the magnitude of this case is going to be quite profound. The attorney for Special Counsel Jack Smith, who argued before the High Court, and Trump-appointed Justice Neil Gorsuch went back and forth a little bit about how this case could be applied in the future. Let's take a listen.
I'm not concerned about this case, but I am concerned about future uses of the criminal law to target political opponents based on accusations about their motives.
There seemed to be sort of a tension between the justices concerned about the magnitude of this and how it applies to future presidents, and maybe a preference or the argument that if you just dealt with Trump in a vacuum, that would allow everything to proceed. And clearly that did not necessarily go over well with most of the justices, right?
Right. And I mean, I think that, people who have been, frustrated that why is the court, the court has expedited this case. They've agreed to the special counsel's request to hear arguments this term with a decision by June. They didn't put it on the calendar for next year. Why can't they do it faster? I mean, the Supreme Court, when they have arguments and then they decide cases, that is precedent that is binding. That's going to be binding on the next president and future presidents down the road. So, they're looking at this on how this is going to be interpreted and applied long after they have left, the court. And so that kind of exchange that you heard there and that you played with Justice Gorsuch, we heard Justice Kavanaugh talking about that, Justice Alito saying, the specter of prosecuting former presidents. We see that, if we look around the world and you'll see people, they throw them in jail after they, lose an election. And so that, could be kind of fundamentally undermining our democracy. But again, you also had the other side with other justices, again, emphasizing, but no president is above the law.
Right. Real quick, Trump wanted to be there today. The judge in New York wouldn't let him go because by law he has to be at the criminal trial. Does it matter that he wasn't in Washington today listening to the High Court?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I think that was great for Donald Trump. And that's why his lawyers, he wanted to come to the last case that they had involving Donald Trump and whether Colorado could kick him off the ballot. Remember that one? They decided a couple months ago, and his lawyers talked him out of coming. And he's lucky that the judge said, no, you can't go, because I think had he been sitting there in the courtroom, it makes it a lot harder for the justice to kind of focus on, and this is in Trump's interest, actually, to focus on how this is going to apply to other presidents. It's not just Donald Trump. So, I mean, I think that the judge probably did him a solid there, even though, you know, he said he wanted to be here.
All right. Jan Crawford, our chief legal correspondent, who covers the high court like no other here at CBS. We appreciate it.